I'll tell you, some days I don't know how I keep us all organized. Anyway, greetings, my friends, and welcome back. Fastest 3 hours in media. This, the most listened to radio talk show in America, the most talked about talk show, the most talked about host, the most envied, the most copied, never equaled, and in some quarters deeply resented talk show in America.
Live from the Southern Command in sunny South Florida, it's Open Line Friday!
Yes, sir, Bob. The big broadcast hour remains, and our telephone number, if you want to be on the program, 800-282-2882. And the email address is lrushbo@eibnet.us. There is some other news out there, ladies and gentlemen, besides all this. And, I always try not to get sidetracked by it all. This is a fascinating story. You're aware of, and by the way, this is not unrelated, as it turns out. You've heard of Corporation A being fined X number of millions or billions of dollars for soiling the snail darter or whatever, right? Have you ever wondered where the fine money goes? I doubt that you have. You probably think it just goes to the government. This is not the kind of thing that people dwell over. I have occasionally been curious, but I've never even thought much about it myself. I just assume that the fines. And when I find out now what happens to it, I kick myself for being so dense and stupid. Having said that, do you get maybe a little hint of an idea where the money goes? This story, Ben Shapiro's website, Daily Wire. Obama administration funneled billions into left-wing activist groups. So, you see a corporation get fined, like BP, for the oil spill in the Gulf, or anything else, and they get fined gazillions and billions of dollars. The banks, Toyota, what was it? Was it Volkswagen that misled people on their emissions controls and lied about? They paid a huge fine. It's billions of dollars. And you just assume it goes to the general fund. Nobody ever wonders who has control of it. When big banks are sued by the government for discrimination or mortgage abuse, they often settle the cases by donating to third-party non-victims. The settlements don't specify how these third-party groups could use the money. So what happens is, if you have a president like Obama and an ultra-left-wing regime, you love to just find corporations for the hell of it, and you give them an option. You can pay $20 billion to the federal government, or you can give it to the Sierra Club, and that you only have to pay $15 million. So the corporate's $15 million versus $20 billion. Yep, that's the deal. Where do I write the check? And the Sierra Club gets $15 million. I'm making up numbers here, but this is how it works. Get this. Investigators have accounted now. This is the result of a congressional investigation. Now, I don't think anything's going to come of it. This is the Republicans investigating, and they've uncovered a huge, I'll stop short of calling it a crime, but man, oh man, this is big. So far, investigators have accounted for $3 billion paid to people who had nothing to do. They were not victims of whatever fraud that happened. Because the corporations under the Obama administration were given the option. Pay the big fine to us at the government, or pay part of it to a group that we designate. And they designate left-wing activists like Acorn, like, I don't know, pick your name. How many left-wing nonprofits are there out there? Critics say that banks are incentivized to donate the money to nonprofits rather than giving it to consumers, because there's the charitable aspect and glow, and boy, look at this corporation. It really cares. Yes, it destroyed this or that or harmed it, but look what they're doing. They're giving it to one of these wonderful left-wing activist groups. And this is how they get funded. And it's a never-ending cycle. Democrat administrations find anything they can get a handle on and give the money to their own left-wing activist groups. Headline of the story, Obama administration funneled billions into left-wing activist groups. Fox News had this yesterday. They reported on it yesterday. House Judiciary Committee investigation. I didn't see it on Fox News. I only know about it because of my show prep and other. Not criticizing anybody here. I'm just saying nobody's going to hear about this. I guarantee you this story will not ever show up in the New York Times. Unless the way it would show up in the New York Times is if the New York Times finds a corporation that didn't give the money to a nonprofit and writes a scathing hit piece on the corporation for being inhumane and lacking compassion. Legislation called the Stop Settlement Slush Fund Act of 2017 has been introduced to stop this. Congress must permanently end the abuses that Obama's Justice Department exploited to use settlements to funnel money to their liberal friends. For 8 years, this went on. I mean, this would not even occur. Conservatives. When you think of finding somebody and the money would go to whoever got harmed, the money would go back to the private sector as quickly as it could, well, theoretically. But we just do not think this way. Here's how the shakedown works. When big banks are sued by the government for discrimination or mortgage abuse, they can settle the cases by donating to third-party non-victims. The settlements do not specify how these groups can use the windfall. So you give the money to Planned Parenthood and they can do anything they want with it. So far, investigators have accounted for $3 billion paid to non-victim entities. As noted by the Competitive Enterprise Institute Center for Class Action Fairness, the director, Ted Frank, says DOJ officials are essentially going after corporate defenders to fund their pet projects. The underlying problem with the slush funds is that we don't know exactly where the money ends up. So, and Eric Erickson has a story similar to this at his website, The Insurgent, the real reason left-wing groups are freaked out by Trump's pick at the EPA. Left-wing groups are freaking out about Scott Pruitt, the Oklahoma Attorney General, Donald Trump nominated for the EPA Environmental Protection Agency. It's safe to say that the collective meltdown over Pruitt is greater than any other Trump pick. You probably have no idea why. It has nothing to do with climate change. Superficially, progressives are saying that Pruitt is a climate change denier, has no business managing the agency he sued so often, but that's just cover. The real reason has to do with money. With the blessing, here we go, it's the same scam, with the blessing of the Department of Justice. That would be Eric Holder and Loretta Lynch. The EPA has been going after major corporations and telling them that they can pay a massive fine to the federal government or pay a lesser amount to various environmentalist groups. And more often than not, to get the EPA off their backs, these companies fork over money to left-wing run environmental groups. Those groups then begin a vicious cycle. They start hounding the corporations to give them money, hound them into action that causes a fine. They file complaints with the EPA, then the EPA shakes them down for even more money. It's a never-ending cycle. Your tax dollars end up funding all of these insane, unhinged, left-wing, radical rioting and protest groups and environmental groups. And this guy Pruitt, the new nominee at EPA, has vowed to shut this down.